Thanks, Lauren. Well, thank you all for coming today. My name is Colin Littlefield. I'm a professional astronomer based in St. George, Utah. But as Lauren said, I also work with Stellar Vista Observatory in Kanab. I'd like to talk to you today about one of the most special parts of Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, and that would be its pristine night skies. As I'll discuss, they're some of the best anywhere in the entire world. So the threat that the night sky faces is from light pollution. So what is light pollution? It's a catch-all term, and it refers to human-generated light that you come across in a natural environment. Basically, it should not be there. And it has a number of known harmful effects, which I've listed up here. They go well beyond just stargazing, but since I'm an astronomer, I'm going to focus on the last one up there, which is how light pollution can wash out the night skies. Now, one of the challenges with studying light pollution and its harmful effects is being able to actually express that in a way that's objective and quantitative, because otherwise you just wind up going outside and saying, wow, that sky looks bad, or this sky looks good. We need to be able to do it with a little bit more rigor than that. And so I think the best way to go about this question is to kind of ask what the question that I put up there. How much light pollution is there compared to the natural brightness of the night sky? And that might sound a little bit weird because the night sky in its pristine state, it's actually not pitch black. There's a little bit of natural air glow from just natural processes. So there is a minimum to how dark a sky can actually get. And that's what we're shooting for. We want night skies to be at that natural level of brightness. And so the way that we express this quantitatively is to describe it with a ratio where we're comparing against natural sky brightness. So if there's no light pollution whatsoever, that would be a ratio of 0 compared to the natural sky brightness. If the light pollution contributes as much light as the natural sky, that ratio would be 1. If the light pollution is 20 times above the natural sky brightness, that ratio would be 20. And it can get even worse than that in a big city. And when you put all these numbers together, we can actually create a scale that lets us map light pollution, kind of like how meteorologists will use colors on a map to represent the intensity of precipitation. And so the scale will look something like this. Now, I know those of you in the back of the room probably can't really see the individual numbers up there, and it's really not important to know what every single color up there represents, but I'll just point out a couple that are going to be important when I show you a map on the next slide. So, oops. Black over here is almost no light pollution whatsoever, about no more than 1% above the natural sky brightness. That's as close to pristine as you could hope for. Green here means that the light pollution contributes about as much light as the natural sky. And then red over here is very, very bad. That's where the light pollution is 15, 20, 30 times above the natural sky brightness. And at that point, it's almost like why even bother looking up because the sky is so washed out. And I've picked out 2 light pollution maps to show you up here. These were obtained using data from a weather satellite in orbit, and it captures light emissions from Earth's surface. And you can do a little bit of modeling to then convert that into an estimate of the quality of the night skies at a particular spot. So I'll start actually on the right with Europe. And I chose Europe over here because southern Utah gets so many European tourists. And I think it's useful to know what kind of night skies they have back at home. And I gotta tell you, this is one of the most heavily light polluted areas in the world. There are very few areas in Western Europe that have pristine skies. And some of the countries there, it's almost like what you'd expect if it was just one giant city. There's so much light pollution. So northern Italy is pretty bad. In fact, pretty much all of Italy is extremely light polluted. The Netherlands are heavily light polluted, so is England. So the tourists who are coming across the Atlantic to visit us, this could be one of their first times ever to see a pristine sky. And I'll show you what our skies look like in just a few minutes. But suffice to say, Grand Staircase has much better skies than what Western Europe does. And even in the United States, pretty much the entire eastern part of the country is pretty significantly light polluted. And the Northeast is probably the worst. That entire corridor from Boston to Washington, D.C., the stars are just almost completely washed out there. And even when you get into the rural areas in the eastern United States, you don't really get down to the natural sky brightness. There's still quite a bit of light pollution. So that would be all these green areas that you see, for example, in Kentucky or rural Missouri. It's still pretty light there. But then you get into the western United States, and I'm happy to say it's a very different story, because there's still light pollution around the cities, as you would expect. But there are also large black areas in these maps where there's almost no light pollution. And it just so happens that Grand Staircase is right in the middle of one of those black areas where the night sky is pristine. So here I'm showing a close-up from the previous map just of southern Utah. So up here is the Wasatch Front, right at the very top. St. George is over here in the bottom left-hand corner. Here's Moab, and then right in the middle of it, that giant black area, that would be Grand Staircase. So there's just this incredibly large area in the middle of southern Utah with almost no light whatsoever. The monument measured its sky brightness back in 2015, and over 90% of it was found to be pristine, which is almost unheard of in the United States. I think the only area that would be better might be if you go up to Alaska, but the stargazing is going to be considerably less pleasant when you're dealing with those horrible temperatures that they have during the winter. And then during the summer, when you only get about an hour of night, depending on where you are in the state. So southern Utah offers, I think, one of the best combinations of dark skies, but also just the convenience of being able to go out and observe and not freeze yourself to death. So I wanted to provide something tangible to show you what these dark skies actually mean in practice. This is a photo taken not by me, I wish, but rather by my friend Dave Lane, who's one of the best astrophotographers there is. He lives in Kanab, and his specialty is taking landscape pictures at night with these otherworldly foregrounds, as you'd expect for this area. But then he also gets the night sky in its full glory in the background. And this was taken by the Perea town site in the southern part of the monument. So with all that I've said about how special southern Utah's skies are, and in particular Grand Staircase, I wanted to point out that I'm hardly the first person who's realized that southern Utah has this incredible resource. A number of public lands in Utah have already sought and received dark sky certification based on the quality of their night sky and also their commitment to preserving it in the future. So all 5 national parks, as you might imagine, have that certification. A number of national monuments do, and I'll highlight one in particular, and that would be Natural Bridges, which I think is every bit as pristine as most of Grand Staircase is. And then a number of state parks also have this certification. I'm kind of surprised that Kodachrome Basin isn't up there, because I've been there several times to camp, and their skies are exceptional as well. And then this might be a little bit surprising that there are communities in southern Utah that have a different type of dark sky certification, and Moab in particular. You might be asking, how can Moab be in the same sentence as dark skies? And there's a different level of certification for communities that are willing to commit to combating light pollution in the future. So for example, if they commit to replace all of their public lighting within 5 years, and then enacting lighting ordinances to kind of control light pollution in the future. So the towns and communities I've listed up here, it's not that they have exceptionally dark skies, they don't, but they've recognized that this, except Torrey, I should say, Torrey is pretty good, but they've all recognized that this is something that they want to preserve, and the time to do it is now before the light pollution gets out of control. I live in St. George, and we know a thing or two about light pollution getting out of control. And I'd also like to provide an example of what happens when light pollution is allowed to just explode quickly without any efforts to mitigate it. So I'm showing here West Texas, again, more light pollution maps. So this would be El Paso and then Midland, Odessa over here. And you can see in between them in the year 2006, there was this wonderfully dark area around Guadalupe Mountains National Park. It looked like this was actually a pretty safe area in terms of night skies. 10 years later, there've been all kinds of oil drilling in the area. And it looks like from these light pollution maps, you would think that a city had just popped up there and within that intervening decade, that you went from having very dark skies to horrible skies in a lot of areas. And the National Park Service, when it measured the sky brightness in Guadalupe Mountains, it actually was able to chart kind of the growth of this light pollution. And then to the south of it, there's a professional observatory, McDonald Observatory, and the growth of that light pollution as it kind of spreads south has been a serious concern for them because they used to have a pristine, they used to have a pristine site, and that's no longer the case with the expansion of this light pollution. So what can be done to mitigate light pollution? So Dark Sky International has 5 principles. And the first one might almost seem trite. Lighting should be useful. But I think that's also important to state explicitly because when we talk about preserving the night skies, we're not telling people that they're not allowed to use lights at night. We're not trying to take people back to the 1800s. But we are asking that if people need to use illumination at night, that it serve a specific purpose. And then low level, again, I think this one might be kind of intuitive. Try to use the minimum amount of light necessary to accomplish whatever that purpose was. Targeted lighting means that it needs to be directed downwards, and there should be no glare from it. And that's what this graphic is here on the right. So at the left, we have an unacceptable street light with tons of glare and light that's directed up at the sky. And then as you go over to the right, you get increasingly better examples of lighting. So this one contains a full cutoff fixture. It blocks the glare and it shines all the light down to the ground. But the thing that sets apart the best street light in this example is that it's controlled. So it's on a timer so that it's still designed so that it shines all the light down, but it turns off when it's no longer needed. And I think this is probably the one that's going to trip the most people up. We want warm colored lighting as opposed to blue lighting. And this is especially prevalent with new LED lights. LEDs are highly energy efficient, but unfortunately they tend to be very blue-white, and that's the worst kind of light that you can use as far as light pollution is concerned. It has to do with how the atmosphere scatters light. So we specifically recommend that the color temperature, for those of you who are familiar with that metric, we recommend a color temperature of less than 3000 Kelvin, which is going to look yellow amber. And this is just a quick example of what happens when you retrofit unacceptable lighting, at least from a night sky perspective. So over here, you've got these 3 lights with lots of glare and light that's directed upwards. And here are 3 full cutoff fixtures that shine all that light downwards and eliminate the glare. And I'd like to close with a slogan that I found when I was looking over some of the dark sky communities. I found one down on the border with Mexico, a tiny town called Bisbee, Arizona. They achieved dark sky certification just last November. And they had this slogan, let's keep what we have. I think that it's worth pointing out to people that we're not talking about fundamentally changing the way that we do things here in Utah. It's about recognizing that we have this exceptionally unique heritage that we can continue to preserve, not only for ourselves, but for future generations. And I hope that message is able to resonate here as it has elsewhere. Thank you.